Atlas, Glam. I also spent a bunch of years in retail before I got to this tech world. But I was in the old age of retail, back in the days where we would actually do inventory counting things. We would close stores to do inventory. We would figure out what sold about 3 months after it sold when I was a buyer, and then try to buy more. And when I was at Procter & Gamble, when we do coupons, we'd find out how many even got cashed in about 5-6 months later. So now, in this new world of retail and mobile, everything's instant, and the potential of the technology is fantastic. So I wish I were a retailer to buy all this stuff now, and yet the retailers have been a little tough. So we're going to learn, I hope, in this session how Shopkick and L'Oreal have actually broken through that. We've got here a rare case of a startup and now a successful business that's really gotten in here and brought technology to retail. And we've got a really impressive fashion major brand that's making use of it without a ton of run-up. So before we start, let me ask both Kelly and Alexis to just introduce themselves a little bit and tell us what they do at each of their companies. Alexis, why don't you go first?
Hi, I'm Alexis Rask. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Shopkick, and all you guys know what that means because you're in Silicon Valley. Usually when we're not in Silicon Valley, that's a sort of location-specific title. So I'm essentially responsible for all of our business partnerships, all of our operations, all the non-technical side of our business.
And Kelly?
Sure, so I'm Kelly Solomon. I work at L'Oreal USA, and I represent our consumer products division. So L'Oreal is actually 4 divisions. We're about 30 brands under the L'Oreal portfolio, and I represent our flagship brand, which is L'Oreal Paris, as well as Maybelline, Garnier, and Essie. And I run the e-commerce and multi-channel group, which is actually a new group, and I think we're going to talk about how that fits in today. I manage our top 7 accounts for all of our e-commerce and multi-channel campaigns.
That's great. So let me start us off with an obvious question. Retailers and brands have been tough sells for technology. They're not the most fashion-forward, shall we say, technology consumers. I remember walking out, I think with Larry Ellison, from a meeting with Sears about 1990, trying to convince them that if they did data warehousing, they could get their inventory runs and their buying reports the same day, see what people bought, and that they just didn't see that a month was not an unrealistic time to buy. So retailers didn't used to get this. So what was it at L'Oreal that made you guys, as a great brand, open to trying some new things, and maybe what problems were you looking to solve?
Yeah, great question. So we often, obviously, meet with our retail accounts. About 98% of our revenue is done through physical distribution. So L'Oreal USA is about a $5.5 billion company. And my division will do about 75-80% of that, and it's largely with our retail partners. So when I attend all of those meetings, those partners have one very, very specific question of me as the digital sort of guru in the room, and that is, how are you going to drive foot traffic to my store? So I think that's interesting because that obviously hits against the multi-channel part of my job. And that's where a lot of our retailers are struggling. They just want traffic in their door. Specifically, they'd like me to drive it to the beauty aisle. So when I get that question, there's obviously a very specific or a few, let's say, tools that I can tap into, and that's sort of where the relationship with Shopkick came in.
Great. And so Alexis, how did you originally target or find L'Oreal and other brands like them and convince them to do something? What was it you got them to start with as a trial or a first experiment with you guys?
Sure. So my background is in the media and marketing space. I've worked for Google, worked for LinkedIn, sort of seen what advertising is meant to do. And the consumer packaged goods category always suffered in digital because, like Kelly said, 98% of their sales happen in the physical world versus online. And so everyone who goes to a L'Oreal, to a Procter, to any consumer packaged goods with the value proposition of I'm going to help you sell online, they're talking about a tiny fraction of the overall picture. So we knew, well, when someone is in their local store, if they're not visiting the beauty aisle, they don't have the opportunity to engage with L'Oreal. If they are visiting the beauty aisle, they've got 10,000 SKUs worth of choice in front of them. They need to figure out how to make some choices, and our technology and our user base is sort of enables that process. So I will say it took a couple of conversations. It took finding the right person who sort of sits at the intersection of driving revenue, doing it with key customers, leveraging not just e-commerce but multi-channel. But from our first conversation forward, it was actually a pretty quick path to, yes, we're going to do something. I think the thing that I would give Kelly credit for is we didn't just say we're going to test something, we're going to throw some spaghetti against the wall. We actually said, what are we trying to impact? What can we measure? What can't we measure? What would make us pretty happy? What would make us really happy? What would knock it out of the park? So a lot of our earliest conversations were about how do we start a partnership and start a pilot that is set up to have proof points, to articulate success, and then to decide what to do with it from there. So that's actually the heavy lifting that for anyone in the audience who is starting a technology company or scaling a technology company, this idea of piloting and this idea of test and learn comes up all the time. And I think we were probably more disciplined than ordinary about doing so.
I would also say one of the keys to success in this partnership was that Alexis did happen to find me. So our multi-channel group at L'Oreal is only a year old. So I've been at L'Oreal for 8 years, but it was only a year ago that I was actually pulled over, and this was in direct response to our retailers restructuring. So a lot of our retail partners now have multi-channel groups, and they need a point person on the brand side to reach out to. So I came over, started this group, and then sort of serendipity, Alexis came, in the next week or whatever it was, and so there was a definite alignment of goals and objectives, specifically with what I had to do and what she had to offer. So half of that was just us connecting at that moment in time.
And so Kelly, could you talk a little bit about what that first test or trial actually was, and then what that's grown into today and how you're using Shopkick?
Sure. Yeah. So like Alexis said, we were really disciplined about the test that we set up. It wasn't just throw it against the wall and let's just hope that it works. We're a big, my company's very big on let's set up the success metrics before we kick off, make sure everyone's aligned, so that if it is successful, we can roll it across the company. So as I said, I represent our consumer products division, and I sit next to our luxury division, our professional products division, and then active cosmetics. So we definitely like to test, if you will, and then roll it across the company. So my master brand, L'Oreal Paris, represents all, let's say, 5 categories of beauty. So that's hair care, hair color, skincare, cosmetics, and sun. So Alexis was smart in the way that we set up our campaigns to test each of those categories, get super clear reads on what user was most reactive to the Shopkick content that we created. How can we drive the most scans in store? Is there seasonality? So we actually put together a 6-month test. We tested against, I believe, all of the categories, maybe not sun. And we were really prescriptive in the way that we rolled it out.
Was that national? Was that chosen regionally? Or did you scale the trial in some way to, in case it didn't work? Or just sort of get it out there and see what happens? Great
question. So it was national. So I have about, let's say, 78,000 points of distribution in the US. So I need something that's wildly scalable. So while geo is great for me in certain instances, and there's a lot of, I'm sure, people in the audience who can offer geo services, and those are great, but I also need those national campaigns. I need to reach everybody wherever they are, regardless of the parameters that I want to put around it. So we went out with a national campaign, even though I do believe you can do geo with Shopkick if you want.
We can, but we oftentimes will encourage the retailer or encourage the manufacturing partner not to over-engineer the test and do it in one store or 5 geos, because the read you're going to get is very small. So at Shopkick, and even in my previous roles at Google and others, you look for signals, you look for expressions of intent, and you look for opportunities to change behavior, and that's usually where you want to market. So if someone is expressing intent to shop, L'Oreal probably wants to talk to them. If someone is standing in the aisle looking for what else to put in their basket, L'Oreal probably wants to interject themselves in some organic, helpful way into that conversation. So we agreed and said, let's do this with some scale so that we can actually read the impact and then decide how you're going to leverage it strategically going forward.
Cool. So before we get to the results you've achieved, maybe, I think for the audience, I'm a Shopkick user, I get it, I know how it works, but I don't think the audience, maybe they do. Could you walk through, one of you, just what an end user would see driven by L'Oreal, and then perhaps what L'Oreal side would see from that same experience? Because one of the tricks of doing anything with retail is usually you need to have some benefit for the shopper, which you totally do, but obviously it needs to have even more benefit for the brand, because in the end they're probably the ones paying. So maybe you could take it from both those two sides, and how do we do that in the Shopkick case or in the L'Oreal case? Because I think that's probably part of what makes this so successful for you too.
I'll take it from the consumer side. So we are in the complex and fortunate business of being a consumer products company who has very measurable commercial value for the retailers and brands we work with. So the consumer knows the Shopkick app as it's their shopping companion for the physical world. It's an app that's full of great content and full of great ideas about products and things I might want or need to know about the next time I'm going to shop. And it understands my physical location, so it knows the difference between me being at the mall versus the local store versus the grocery store. So for our consumer, they have a better experience with our app. If we have lots of interesting products in there, lots of interesting content, we can give them how-to tips on how to best dye their hair or get a smoky eye look with makeup. That is actually content that they want because it might turn into what they're going to shop for when they next go to Target. So thinking about the partnership with L'Oreal, they are great sort of brand ambassadors of these products. They have great celebrity talent, they have great content. So our feeling was, if you can fill the app up with that, that's piece one of the puzzle. Piece two of the puzzle is what we call kicks, but kicks for us, they're just a points currency that consumers can earn anywhere and everywhere they shop. And we give the consumer kicks if we see them do high value things along the path to purchase. Engage with branded content, visit particular stores, visit particular aisles, engage with individual SKUs or items. So we would say to them, there are kicks tied in with the L'Oreal products, and that's how that messaging started to integrate.
Yeah, and to that last point on the kicks, so I like that as a brand. I don't have a loyalty program. Some of my largest retailers don't, like Walmart. So it was a super interesting proposition for me that I can tap into the kicks and have that loyalty run by Shopkick, and I honestly don't have to deal with it, don't have to get into the weeds, and don't have to drag all of my teams into setting up a loyalty program. So that's valuable to me. But back to your question about the brand sort of side of the Shopkick experience. So what was super interesting for the L'Oreal brand was that this is the mobile path to purchase. So this is couch to store, and it's very measurable through Shopkick. So I can measure my couch engagement through swipes on the content lookbook, so I can understand when this is happening. You know, we always thought highest engagement is on Thursday for your weekend shopping trip, and I think it actually ranges from Tuesday to Thursday. So that's interesting for me. But then also the fact that they're going in store. First of all, they're scanning my UPCs, so I don't have to set up new tags on my products, which is not possible, right? So my supply chain has other things to do. They're not going to put Shopkick specific tags or anybody's specific tags on my products. So love that it pivoted off of my existing UPCs, and it actually shows me what products they're scanning, in what doors, with what retailer, and completes that store engagement phase of that mobile path to purchase. And quite honestly, that's something that we as a brand have not been able to crack. Even when I try to integrate with, my Target app or my Walmart app, there's not, that goes through them, so there's a certain level of complexity in retrieving that data. So Shopkick is very transparent. We actually review it every week. And it hits against that mobile path to purchase with more visibility than we've ever had.
No, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Can you share how the L'Oreal team sort of looks at it? And I mean, those are all good examples of data, but is there any one piece of data people really hang on? Is it a lot of what you said is analytics and understanding behavior, but there's also just a straight promotion and couponing capability here and a traffic capability. So without divulging too many trade secrets, I mean, what are you guys really looking at to see, is this working? Do we do more of it next year? Do we less of it? What really turns that crank so that Alexis can keep getting recurring revenue?
Well, I'll let Alexis go through some of the results, but I will tell you, so our pilot was in 2013, so it was last year. It was just with the L'Oreal brand, and this year we'll roll out with many brands, all of my brands in consumer products, some additional brands in the building. So it was absolutely deemed a success, and that's one of my roles is to drive innovation in the building. So certainly hit against my objective there, and that I was able to share with the rest of our 30 brands and waterfall it across the building. But I'll let you talk to some numbers.
Yeah, so Kelly talked about one of the key dialogue points between L'Oreal and their retail partners is foot traffic to the store and foot traffic to the aisle. So So we knew going into this, one of the most important questions to Shopkick was going to be, Shopkick, do you drive foot traffic to the beauty aisle for our products? And so in our 2013 pilot, we've seen a few million users go to specifically L'Oreal beauty aisles, pick up those SKUs, scan those UPC codes, and engage. And so we're very easily able to articulate, not only are we doing it, but we're doing it at pretty significant numbers. Now in 2014, I think it's about nine lines in total out of the 30 in the building who are leveraging it. And they're looking at a couple of key metrics. The first being that foot traffic in the aisle, and the possibility for conversion that happens once you capture someone in the aisle. So how that converts to purchase, how that converts to future purchase intent. But there's also what happens before the store visit. So we've done all this branded content integration, and we've seen tens of millions of earned media value in impressions. We've seen millions of engagements where consumers are engaging with L'Oreal content right at the moment where they're planning their next shopping trip, and they're adding L'Oreal products essentially to their consideration set into their list. So we sort of break our metrics and our reporting out along the path to purchase steps, from awareness to education to intent to consideration to purchase. And we say, here's how we're doing against each of those metrics. And then we'll boil that all down to a payout. And so we'll call Kelly and we'll say, good news, 2-to-1 payout, you probably would have been happy. Looks more like indicators are pointing to 4.5-to-1 or so forth. And shouldn't we show this to others?
That's great. It's a terrific set of examples around concrete results from marketing and retail, which I'll tell you as somebody who's done both those for a long time. People like to justify their promotions and their work based upon many great ideas and concepts, but it's rare you can really nail it down. And in doing so, I suspect you'll stay in the stack reasonably well, because it'll be important to L'Oreal as they make their decisions.
Yeah, and we also actually don't really consider it a promotion. So we consider it more of a awareness tool, and of course conversion in store. So other than the kits, there's no mobile coupon associated with it, there's no discount, because we very much believe at L'Oreal in the valorization of our products. We put hundreds of millions behind research and innovation of our formulas, of our packaging. So what we also love about Shopkick is that while there are kicks associated with it, and there's an overt loyalty program, there is no discounting of the products. So that's something that's really, really valuable to me as a brand.
That's very good. So we've only got a minute or two left, but I wonder, Kelly, if you might tell us and the audience some other areas broadly that brands like L'Oreal might be interested in at least experimenting with over the next few years, because some of us are investors. There's all kinds of sexy stuff. There's Beacon, there's social shopping, there's God knows what else. I mean, what's topical?
So there's, as you said, there's so much out there. It's actually hard to know where to go, right? So I'm super fortunate in L'Oreal that we have a corporate board that sounds sort of all of our innovation projects. So again, our corporate board sits over the 4 divisions of L'Oreal, and it vets everything from beacons to apps to social shopping.
That probably doesn't sound very good to Alexis when she started the sales cycle. There's a corporate oversight board to this.
It took a while.
Yeah, well, it's interesting though, because it helps all of us. Because when you come in through the corporate board, then you have access to 30 brands. When you come in through me, and that's also a possibility, then it's my job to say, okay, I'm going to structure this test, I'm going to go through, I'm going to roll it out, and then perhaps I'm going to show it to the other 30 brands in the building, depending on the success or not. So we definitely have, we have a lot of crazy things on our map. Everything from wearables, which is something that we were looking at, to the connected home, which we're super interested in around beauty, to building our own apps. We just launched a virtual makeup try-on tool, which actually pivots off of facial recognition and cinematography, so you can actually move. So tech is definitely, and digital and connected and everything you can imagine is of interest to us, which is why we actually now have a point person for the whole building.
Very cool. So do you have any parting advice for the entrepreneurs in the room trying to get into retail and brands and their little startups that don't have credibility yet? How do you get that first meeting?
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson learned in my experience and my background has been you have to actually do what you promise to do. So if you're walking into a meeting and you get asked, can you do these 5 or 10 different things, it's actually really good to be honest about what you can and can't do. because then you're going to live up to it, and you also need to have a data and a measurement strategy so that you can say, remember when you asked me to do X, Y, and Z and I said I could? Well, here's how, and here's how it's looking, because then you have accountability in the partnership to really be jointly building something. And so I think approaching it from the mindset of we're trying to build a long-term partnership, not just grab some dollars in or throw a promotion up or do something that doesn't have longevity. That's the way we tend to approach our business, and it's so far working pretty well.
Sure is. I guess you've done great. Thank you all for being a great audience, and we'll see you in the afternoon.